that. I think we're live. Okay. Okay. This is, of course, the Grey Lounge. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum to all our Grey Lounge members, and of course to our very dear friend of mine, Nick Grove. You all audience are now quite familiar with our friend Nick and his philosophies and his views and his perspective towards life, and all that is so far very real to us until we wake up one day and realize that it wasn't, or however it may actually be. So having Nick on board today is going to make this program fun and also very informative for a person like me to get to hear about his perspective and his views on the topic. The topic today we have chosen is absolute relativity. This topic actually comes out from the book that is under publication that I took at least 10 to 12 years to compile. It's a book of philosophy and it covers sort of everything, I call it, because the next program that people will get to see on the Grey Lounge is termed as the theory of everything. And it may sound very arrogant to people when I say the theory of everything, but it's actually not. It's just a theory of how everything, the word everything, is designed, how everything about everything works, basically. What are the ingredients? What is the general formula behind an everything that we term as? And the theory of everything actually tries to cover the topics of how everything should work, how everything is designed so far by mankind since the advent of mankind, that is, and how far we've come across by means of our advancements and developments. So today's topic is absolute relativity. Nick, my friend, you would have to bear with me for a minute before I express my views on that. And I would then want us to talk about it and see how we both are similar and how not. So
Looking
let's
forward to learning.
Yeah, sorry, come again.
I'm looking forward to learning.
So am I. So am I.
Always
Okay,
be learning.
yeah. So the term absolute relativity. Why did I come up with such a paradoxical term, absolute relativity? Because I believe that absolute, the term absolute, has to. I mean, the way it connotes that it seems to demand some sort of an existence of itself superior to everything else. That's why it kind of predicates being absolute, being the very absolute structure of being of anything. So when we say absolute, it kind of reminds me of a Latin saying, a proverb. It goes like "Salus populi suprema lex esto." I may be pronouncing it wrong because Latin is not my language. But the English is that salvation of people lies in absolute justice. Now, salvation, we understand. People, we understand. Lies, we understand. In absolute justice, justice we understand, but absolute justice when it kind of the connotation to absolute justice kind of triggers a set of questions in a person like me, in a mind like mine. So what I tend to do is I read and research and see the claims so far man has made of what absolute systems so far are registered in what areas and cultures and religions and beliefs and philosophies and science or however. So then I come to a conclusion that man has so far tried to to get to the answer of some sort of a question. Nick's questions could be very different from mine, and my questions could be very different from and henceforth. So, but collectively, I believe, the way I see mankind is that from the very advent of mankind, man is trying to, within a given time frame, trying to excel and excel to some sort of an object that it's looking at, some sort of a motive behind continuing to breathe, continuing to reproduce, continuing to to keep the show going on, despite the losses, despite the setbacks, and despite everything that man has so far faced, and to, to so much so that it has now started um, to eradicate itself out of the picture, to remove mankind from the equation. And yet there is still this want, this drive to, to reach to a conclusion before we collectively manage to put an end to this misery called life. So, so when I see things that uh, I, I I see things in a way that okay, there's a group of religious people, there's a group of philosophical people, there's a group of scientific people, and then there's a group of totally undefined, spontaneous people who could sometimes take something out of a religious belief, and sometimes take it out of science, and sometimes out of art, where not, just to formulate the finest shape of an answer to a question. And I am kind of like that. I when I don't get the answers to my questions, I can easily grab the Holy Bible from my library and start looking at answers in the Old Testament or the New Testament, or being born in a Muslim family, I tend to take the Quran, the Holy Quran, out of my library and start looking for questions when I'm actually thinking that maybe these books have the answers to the questions that I may have. And when I want to deliberately break free from this belief structure just for a while, to look at things abstractly and see myself as an unbiased person, and probably want to kind of reevaluate myself, that I do not want to follow something just for the sake of it. I want to follow something or believe in something when this thing abstractly also convinces me of its existence and its absolutism, I would say. So so I tend to look at philosophers. I read Bergson, I read Nietzsche, I tend to go to Hegel's concepts at times, or Plato, or Socrates, or Aristotle, or whatnot. And then Iqbal, our a philosopher from our region, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, is very, very fine man, a poet also, a philosopher. But then I also tend to detach myself from all of these, so that I would say that, okay, I also managed to develop an opinion of my own, because all the religious scriptures seem to, at the end of the day, tell me that I would be questioned for from the set of experiences that I've had, from the knowledge that I have gained, not what Nick has told me, or what this book or that book has told me, but what I have acquired within, what has related to me over the years, and what my wisdom has said yes to. Now, if that is the criteria, that my wisdom is my wisdom is the meter, my wisdom is going to take me to wherever that could be, then I am to be held questionable first by myself. If I believe in absolute justice, now coming back to the topic, then what is absolute justice to me? So then I explored, and I thought of the word justice, and I split it in two words, as just, and then, of course, an added sound, consonant to it, so to speak. So just to make it a noun, and then I realized that just means the absolute proper proportion of everything. It could be honesty, it could be uh, compassion, it could be love, it could be right, it could be morals, it could be ethics. It has to be this is the most complete word that I have come across, Nick, all my life. The word just, and this is so commonly used that okay. So now, if being just means being the perfect man, then it means being just has to have some sort of a backup support of an absolute system. Otherwise, you would not be just. You could not actually practice justice. Then it kept me wondering, thinking, and doing research all these years, and then I was like, okay, I have to believe in some sort of an absolute system to put my mind at rest. And then I realized that among the philosophers, there's still some sort of a process of learning and process of evolution going on among scientific people, science people. There is still things, there are still things which are being refuted every next day. And then I went to the arts people, and they were just they would not give a damn, to be honest, about anything. They would say, you know what, you believe in your thing, let me believe in my thing, and let's chill, dude, and let's just think and let's create. And I'm like, okay, that's the wrong window. So it's a beautiful window, but it's the wrong window for me to get an answer from, because everybody has an answer of his own over there, and I might not be able to relate to just about anything that I get from there. So then I revert back to the only thing left is the religious people. Why? Because they seem to claim that we've got the answer to everything and it would never change until the end of times, until the judgment day. And then I'm like, okay, let me hear it out. Let me see what they call absolute justice, what they call absolutism. Absolutism and despotism should first be separated. I mean, people kind of confuse absolutism with despotism, that okay, it has to be very strict and very tyrant and very harsh, but that's not the case. Just like we discussed earlier, that just means the proper, extremely precise proportion of everything. So any tilt towards being a bit too strict or a bit too lenient would not make it just. So it has to be a perfect system. And if the books of the Lord Almighty claim that they are the word of the Lord, or the greater conscious, the conscious for that matter, conscience for that, so I would say, or a system for that matter, then it means that for us there is an absolute structure somewhere in the air, somewhere around us, somewhere within us, somewhere. And that system we have to call, for the sake of discussion, for the sake of belief, an absolute system. An absolute system of justice, or absolute system of anything. Now, if that is absolute, then the justice that it promotes has to be absolute justice. Now, if we come back to the Latin saying, that the salvation of people lies in absolute justice, then we have to agree to some level that we live in a derivative form from some sort of an absolute. That is why we call it relative, like the theory of relativity, that relative rest and relative motion, and absolute rest and absolute motion. And there is no such thing as absolute rest, because everything is a continuous state of motion. And then we're like, okay, so there is no absolute rest. Is there something that is not existing in the structure of the Lord Almighty? That does not fit the definition of being the Lord, because there has to be an absolute state of rest somewhere for the God, by definition, to acquire having everything. That's another discussion we will have some other day. But the thing is that we have to believe that there is an absolute form of everything available in the store of all the believers, and the store of the deities that they believe. So what I am trying to say, what I'm concluding now, so that I would want your opinion on this, is that every person has to first, within oneself, stand next to an absolute structure for it, or for one to believe or generate a derivation from, in the shape of a relative structure, be it relative justice coming out of the books, be it the church dictating the state that this is what the book says, but this is how you are supposed to derive a relative state of justice for law enforcement and for the society, and be it the Holy Quran for the Islamic states to have an absolute structure or system of justice. And if you cannot apply that for whatever reason, then what you have to do is stay very close to it and build a derivative out of this absolute system and call it relative justice. And hence we drop down to relative morality or relative society or relative structure of state, be it democracy or be it communism or be it caliphate, what we call khilafat in Islam, and be it any system, it has to be a derivative from the absolute structure. So why I termed it absolute relativity, I'm going to end this for now. Why? It's because we have to live in a relative state of mind. We have to live in a relative state of everything because we do not or cannot, we do not know of and we cannot acquire the absolute system of the Lord because we are not the perfect being. We are not the perfect uh, creation because we are, after all, a creation. We are not the creator ourselves. So by definition, we have to have a certain amount of flaws or a certain beginning and an end, which by definition God does not have. So we are by birth, we are innately a relative state of mind, a relative state of consciousness. So within this structure of relativity, we have to come up with an absolute state of relativity which should not deviate from that relativity at least. That relativity, if stays absolute without adding the element of despotism, because absolute also means absolute justice. So having absolute justice is a state of absolute reality, keeping in view the paradox that you cannot also acquire the absolutism that is referred to in the books of the Lord, but the derivative that you would use has to remain absolutely just. Otherwise, wherever it is evolving into something else, or rather devolving into something else, that's where it loses its uh, its its definition, its authenticity, and hence it then starts to create injustice in the system, and thereby it triggers plenty of questions and chaos. So the answer to the lady's question who asked about relative morality is that we as mankind have managed to establish within our cultural and our religious uh, and moral structures, we have developed state to state, time to time, era to era. We have developed certain rules and norms derived from some sort of an absolute, which we call relative morality. And this relative morality, for some reason, is so relative now that it loses its absolutism, which I oppose, and hence the transformation loses a lot of content, which makes it very inauthentic to me, or I would say it's difficult to validate it by means of the absolute that it started from. And now, if we look at it, be it the Russian invasion now, or be it any invasion, or be it invasion of thought, or invasion of philosophy, or invasion of a concept, that is, to me, uh, a product of losing the absolutism of a relativity that we want to formulate. That's that's what I wanted to say. I hope I've managed to convey my message, Nick. If you want to add
Well,
your views on this.
I was, you probably saw me writing notes as you were talking. And I think there were so many bits that jumped out for me. I mean, I've got, a good page of notes, and I write them as yes.
Now it's my turn.
just jotting, right? So, I mean, I think and at each point, I changed the journey, the start point of maybe what I was thinking, but it comes back to right now, being now. What's, kind of that looking up and getting a reality check, because it feels like, and that's based on your end point of this absolute morality. Where are we now? What does it look like? Because it's shifting so quickly that we have to take quick snapshots, right? And I think that you're right. There's chaos within it, right? Now, if you understand some of the absolute reality, the relative morality, and how to trigger us humans within that environment, which is what we are, then you can get a reaction, because ultimately, as we talk about, we're, the universe being an energy form, right? A wave. And that's where, talking about the point in a effectively a line, but I don't see balance like that. In some, so I think balance in a 3, because if you have 2, you have a seesaw, right? To achieve balance, you have 3 points, like a triangle. Yeah, then you can balance. Now, at the same time, I think of that in a 4-dimensional. So you have an X, Y, Z axis, and effectively that's your sphere and what quadrant are you in. And ultimately, it comes back to stillness, right? So once you're looking around, you have to be still in yourself to understand yourself for a moment, and then look around. And what those people that have spent some time being still, they're now looking around and seeing the absolute chaos within the same system, in the same sphere. And I think that where we are now in our evolution, if we think about the influence of energies on us as an energy system, different things have different impacts, be it the sun, be it the moon, be it the other planets. They're constantly in evolution. And we do have to keep taking checks from lots of different areas to see what's actually happening, what's happening within our relative reality, right? Where's the consensus shifted to? Because, the consensus which was 200 years ago is very different to the consensus now in terms of, what may be absolute and what are relative absolutes and relative morals and other bits and pieces. But the structures that are guiding those and also managing them, let's say, we look at that, I think haven't shifted that much. They have, but there's that indoctrination of something that solid bit underneath it. I think not everybody can touch it. A lot of this thing's getting mixed up now in terms of, especially with the realities about what's real, what isn't real, what information can I trust, who can I trust, who's saying what is, who's responsible for what, not just now, but over the last couple of 100 years, last 500 years. And all of that, I think, impacts us in terms of our trying to understand. And I think this is our heart and our mind trying to find some sort of balance, right? But it comes back into going inside. From that quiet space, that's the, talking about the different areas, I think that's the potentialism, right? So what's in that potentialism? And like you're saying, it's kind of an equal and opposite force, right? So when we're moving around it, and I think this is, at the moment, a lot of people are trying to really sort of living spirituality, and it's coming back to, and I say that in the broadest sense of the word, right? Because I think it comes back to the books having answers, but actually most things have questions. They open up more questions for people that are inquisitive. They might answer something, but it's kind of going down that rabbit hole and expanding that knowledge and feeling your way through it. Now, when you get to all of that and you come back and you're talking about absolute justice and various other bits, they can teach you what others have written, right? And either their perspective on it. If you go back through to maybe some of the older, Plato and some of the philosophers and other bits and pieces, most of it isn't unadulterated, but it's also written from a particular time and a particular place and a particular perspective. So all of those things have value, but it still comes back to that center, what's in your center. And I think that, bringing this back to what is just, I think most people know themselves when they've done something that doesn't align with their inner nature, their real inner, true inner self. If they have an argument with somebody, they'll know it. Now, some people are very adept at, using that because they understand it triggers, but ultimately the core, when we're talking about birth, that's new, that has to be fostered. And that gets fostered in different environments. And that's what I think you're seeing now is the culmination, this chaos and this misunderstanding of what is relative morality and justice, right? Is because not enough people, and strangely enough, this is my, last 2 years, lots of people have had time to sit and think. Now, the fear and the other elements that come into it of being locked down, I can see it with people. Most people wanted to just get out. They had to do something. They couldn't be locked down for more than 2 minutes. And actually, there's a need to stop. And if everybody could stop and go in for that time and actually connect on level, it starts to, and then come up and look around and then take fresh eyes. It's like having an eye bath, I think, is kind of what a lot of people need in a sense. And then looking around and then trying to apply it. And that, I've done a lot of work, we'll do it another session, but going into your heart and doing the healing. So, in your own personal journey, you're going to get moments that have been where you've been unjust, right? Where you've hurt somebody or done something or it hasn't felt right. And most people, once they get through a particular time, even, as a kid, you can see it, you'll do something and something will get you. It's in real time sometimes, this law. I don't know however it works, right? Other things, they're very difficult because they go on cycles, and you might have something that you did 20 years ago. I had something recently, and it was something happened 21 years ago for me, and then it came back round in a different form. But when it came back round, I recognized it as coming back round. And it was almost like, I wasn't surprised when it did. Right? I wasn't surprised. I recognized all of the characteristics. They were all the same elements, just in a slightly different order. Right? And I think justice can work like that. It's not you're getting a 1-for-1, right? Something happens and something else might happen that balances it out. It's that equilibrium. And it may not just be there, it might be in another point as well. And that's the bit I think that is difficult for people, because it's almost we're moving through, and without I don't think really many people, unless you're really in a monastery somewhere, right, get that point where they're completely neutral in their own energy field throughout their lifetime, or where they recognize it. You hit a certain point, you can feel it, but the rest of the time your energy is fluctuating, and that's all of these other aspects that are around us, and mostly other people, right? Because everybody's dealing with something, and you can see that coming off as almost like imagine like a jet engine. And I look at it like trauma. Trauma is this thing that comes through, and we talked about it, right? And I think that trauma, then obviously, it's very easy for that trauma to shift people's relative morality and justice and what's right and what's wrong, and that pain. And that shifts the landscape of how people perceive that, what that relative position should be, and what the absolute version of it is, right? And they're kind of like that, never the twain shall meet. And if they do, It's there. Now, how can you start to mitigate that? Well, I call it ABC, right? Always be clearing, right? So even if you're getting into these positions, it's very hard, but even if there are things happening to you, you can see it, you can work with your own energy to change that vibration, to change that frequency, that flux. It's hard because there's so many things we're trying to do, and we're living in a world where I don't think we're really geared up to understand the enormity of the last 100 years, and probably the impact it's having now in terms of understanding our purpose. Who are we? What are we doing here? What does that mean in terms of man? What does it mean in terms of the universe? What is this thing? And all of those questions, bringing in views, are getting adulterated. And that's why it's very hard for people to find it. And I think that creates a lot of, you can see it's creating a lot of tension. Right? And something has to come. Now, what's the best thing for that? I think that really is not war, it's not all these other things, right? It's actually everybody, the collective, as it were, coming together. And if everybody could just stop.
Okay, wait, I have a question now. I agree. And man has so far been able to, we have to give man some sort of a credit over here, because we have so far been able to achieve a lot, not knowing that we have the tendency to destroy it also, go towards some sort of a destructive mechanism. Maybe we just get too bored about something, and after having created it, so we say, okay, you know what, I'm going to recreate something. So back to the old drawing board kind of mechanism that man has probably, but we have as mankind, we have been able to achieve a lot of things. And sitting here today discussing about universal vibrations, or spiritual activities, or philosophy or religion, that is quite an achievement that man has made so far, with the assistance of course, some sort of supernatural activity going on around us, just to support us in the quest that we have, the innate quest that we have get the answers. The sort of books that we go through, they actually, the whole purpose of the word of the Lord, or the creation of science and of arts and of other studies, even by man or by means of some sort of supernatural activity, the whole purpose was to create questions, to generate questions within the mind, so the mind does not put itself at some sort of a relative state of rest, but rather keeps it in a relative state of motion, so that